my unpopular take is that Georgia in 2024 was Kirby Smart's best coaching job of his career. You say, wait a second, JD. Hey, talking about the same Kirby Smart? Dude who won 2 national titles, back-to-back, mind you. A year where you won the SEC, that's nice, but you got bounced in the college football playoff in your first game. That's your best coaching job? Yeah, I absolutely believe that's the case. Why? We'll unpack it right now. Make sure you're subscribed here. If you're new to the show, welcome. It's college football year-round. Georgia fans, y'all have been dialed in and gotten dialed in with us, so we appreciate you for that. But if you're new, as I just mentioned, get locked in, baby. It's a long way to go till next season. You got to get your college football fix right here, college football year-round. So this year, Georgia looks very un-Georgia-ish. From a roster level, from an execution level, just across the board, it was a very un-Georgia-ish look. Now, to be fair, I'm making excuses, but to be fair, schedule was brutal. Especially in hindsight, they played 3 college football playoff teams, one of them twice in Texas. Probably worth noting they were a smooth 4-0 in all of those games against college football playoff teams, neither here nor there. Then they played 2 other teams in Alabama and Ole Miss that were right on the bubble on Selection Sunday. Both teams that thought they had a case to get into the dance. Of course, they didn't, but those were 2 of their losses throughout the season. The point I'm trying to make here, what do you think about when you think about Georgia under Kirby Smart? You think about a defense that thumps, probably somewhere in the top 15, top 10 in America, that plays with their hair on fire, that's violent, that's physical, that stops the run. You think about an offense that it's been some different iterations under it, from Todd Monken to Mike Bobo now, but you think about an offense that's, in a word, complementary. They're going to run the football. They may run the football because they threw the football first to kind of open things up. They're going to be elite with their personnel. They're going to just have better Jimmies and Joes than you up front and on the perimeter, and they're going to make sure that they're attacking you up from all levels and that they're imposing their will on you. Well, y'all, as I said, not a very Georgia-ish team this year. This was a defense that was spotty / inconsistent in the secondary. They allowed 4 yards a carry up front. That doesn't sound like a Georgia defense that I just described moments ago. And then offensively, I couldn't figure out who they wanted to be. They couldn't run the football, that's first off. And then when they went to throw it, as they did about 36, 37 times a game, they led America in drops. Carson Beck had 12 picks this year. Now, we still had a top 10 QBR, but my point being here, like Georgia, while they were good in a lot of ways, they weren't really elite at anything, y'all. Here's a comparison for you. LSU, when you compare their points per game numbers and points allowed per game numbers, they're essentially the same. They scored right around 30 points a game. LSU allowed a field goal a game more than Georgia. Both very different finishes to their year. LSU finished in the regular season with a record of 8-4. Georgia won the SEC. They shouldn't have. Wasn't supposed to happen. What I just told you, they were running for 102 yards a game, I believe it was. Or maybe they were 102nd, in rush yards per a game when it came to what they did offensively. It shouldn't happen that way. It should not happen that way. So why did it happen that way? Why was Georgia able to overcome some of their areas where they were, let's call a spade here, pretty mediocre? I think you look at what Georgia was in some really key points in their season. What were those points? Backs against the wall, after a loss specifically, where you have to figure it out and bounce back and figure out who you're going to be. Georgia was, first class in those moments. You lose to an Alabama. You go to Austin, Texas a few weeks later. You're not favored. Everyone on game day picks against you, as Kirby Smart in ghost storytelling fashion told Holly Rowe postgame. And what do? Beat the brakes off Texas. Beat the brakes off Texas. And then you turn around and a few weeks later you lose to Ole Miss. And I said on this show, I think Ole Miss beat them because they had better players. And I don't know if that's the case still here today coming into 2025, but that looked like the case on that Saturday. You lose that game. The next week, who do you play? But a team that would eventually be a college football playoff team in Tennessee. What do? Beat the brakes off of them. I was watching that game from a hospital room because we had just had our baby girl, and I was like, Georgia did it again. I was telling my baby girl, hey, this is what Kirby Smart does. You think you got him. You think you knocked him down, and they're like a boxer that just keeps coming back for more. Another key moment. Georgia Tech. They're down against Georgia Tech. Takes them 8 overtimes. If Georgia loses that game, their playoff hopes aren't dashed, but they got to win the SEC to get it done. Again, steady hand. Nobody panicked. They find a way to win that game. The SEC title game, this is the last one I'll say. The SEC championship game, they are down at half. To make matters worse, Carson Beck goes out of the game at half with an ugly play to finish the first half, and then you're counting on Gunnar Stockton to get it done. Georgia wins the game, again, in overtime. You kind of just shrug your shoulders and say, it probably shouldn't have happened that way, but it does. And we talked a lot about Georgia and their traits on this show. Cato and I talked about it a lot off the air, but on the air we talked about Georgia just has some of those things that it's sort of cliche, but they're just a little bit unquantifiable. Because I just told you the quantifiables. The numbers aren't great, but a wins and losses perspective was good enough. And now Georgia, they didn't accomplish their ultimate goal of winning the national championship. But I'm here to tell you, for whether you want to blame them being dinged up or what they couldn't do running the football or how physical they weren't, they shouldn't have probably even won the SEC. By nature of their numbers, they should have been 8-4. Now, are they still super talented? Of course. I'm not telling you that Georgia is, somehow without the talent that it requires to go win the SEC. That's not what I'm saying here. But you look at how they got it done this year, and you can't help but feel a little bit like, man, that culture at Georgia, I don't know how, I don't know why, but it made the difference. So if the culture makes the difference, who's responsible for the culture? That locker room. Yeah, 100% true. But who's responsible for setting the culture for that locker room? The coaching staff. Who's in charge of the coaching staff? We arrive at a one, Kirby Smart. So everyone's talking about how Georgia underachieved this year because they didn't win the national championship. And I think Kirby Smart would tell you that too. I think they had national title written on their goals. I think they want to get back to Atlanta to hoist that hardware and find a way to go for their third and 4 years. Absolutely, but it didn't happen. But I don't think it's something where you say, man, I guess that's the end of Georgia. I guess this 12-team playoff is just gonna write them off now. It's the end of Kirby Smart. I don't think it's going to be easier. Make that very clear. But Georgia, we just finished up National Signing Day for this 2025 cycle, the standard signing day, and Georgia's sitting there with the number 2 class, just hanging out. Georgia, that's apparently going to have a downtrend and fall off a cliff and this, that, and the other. Georgia's not going anywhere. The roster talent will still be elite. And as long as Kirby Smart is setting the tone out there, we're going to see more seasons like this where I don't know if it's going to be Georgia's outmatched from a talent perspective, but in games that they will always have a chance because of who Kirby Smart is and because of what they bring to the table. So the culture, the traits, all of that was what made Georgia this year. And why did they have those things? Because of who their head coach is. To me, that's been Kirby's best job so far. The talent was great on other teams. There's no way around that. But to have the year they did where they won the SEC with the numbers they didn't have, tip of the hat to Kirby Smart.